Hey everyone, Andrew here. A while back ago I did a microcoil for you. Now some people said it wasn't technically a microcoil because a microcoil has to be less than 2 millimeters in size. This one was wrapped around an M3 screw, which is a 3mm screw, so technically maybe it's not a microcoil. But for me, microcoils, it's not so much the actual size or the depth of them, it's more how they're actually compressed, so that they become a solid. Every single coil is actually joining and touching within it. Now I did it with 0.32 Kanthal and I put a cotton wick into it. Now these as coils are really quite long lasting. They're very rigid, they're quite robust, and when a wick is finished or is spent, you can literally just take it out, dry burn the coil and then pop a new one into it. And as I said, you know, it'll hold its shape and everything, particularly with 0.32 Kanthal, because it really is. It's a very, very solid coil in the end. Now, I like cotton. I think cotton gives you great flavour. But what I did find is that perhaps the flavour doesn't last. This is, again, just for me. The flavour doesn't last as long as perhaps it might do with some other wicks that are out there. So I've been trying to see with my coil, which as I say will last quite a long time, I've been trying to see if I can actually get, silica wick into it to see how that would actually perform. Now, the problem is with silica wick when you actually put it into an already pre-made coil. So in other words, you're not actually wrapping the wire around the wick. The wire is already wrapped. It's, you've got a little opening that you have to get it through. The problem is actually feeding it into it. Now, there are many ways of actually feeding the wick in, but as far as I'm concerned, every time you do that, it ends up that the wick is sitting too loosely within the actual coil. There's too much room around it. So I've been trying to figure out a way where I could actually get enough wick in so that it's sitting nice and firm within the actual coil, which will then give the best results in terms of vapor production. So I've come up with a way of doing it. This is using 2mm silica wick, and so what I wanted to do is basically show you how this works and how I actually do it. Ultimately, the setup, because you end up with more strands, you end up with 3 strands on either side of the coil, is a little bit different. But I suppose the key thing here really is, how do you actually get the silica wick into the M3 coil? So what we'll be putting in is basically 3 strands of 2mm silica wick. Okay, so here we have some 2mm silica wick. Now I'm going to take, just to be safe, I'm going to take about each of these squares is 1 centimetre. So I'm going to take about 15 centimetres of this and just chop it off there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another piece, which is going to be half of that, so about 7. You don't have to be too accurate on this, it's just approximates. So something like that there. So that is the wick that we actually need. Now, going back to the coil, and here is the coil, the M3 coil. Let's just take the safety off here and just fire it up. There, you can see it there, glowing nicely. Now this is one that did have a cotton wick in it. I haven't done anything to it since, so it's basically being recycled. And again, that's one of the great things about these coils, is that you can just keep them going for quite a long time. Shape-wise, it's still absolutely perfect, just as when I put it in, and this has been in for certainly a couple of weeks at this stage. Okay, so don't want to make the same mistake as last time, so we'll tighten that off so that there's no way that it can fire on me. What we then need to get is just a little bit of Kanthal. We all end up cutting bits off that we don't particularly need. So let's see, here's just a little bit here. In fact, I'll tell you what, I'm going to actually put a new piece on because that's just being used quite a bit. So let's get a little piece off here. One of the great frustrations about Kanthal is that every time you seem to get a piece out you know, you get the thing going, the whole bloody thing on, oh, it's done it again. Right, luckily it's not terribly expensive, this stuff. So let me just get a piece here. So, piece of Canthal wire. Obviously we're not going to be using this, so you don't need to flame it or burn it or anything like that. Fold it in half, like that, so we have a loop at the end. Then what we want to do is take the longer piece of wick here, fold that in half, pop the wire onto it, so that we have a pull here, and then just scrunch that down there at the end, and you can twist it if you like, just to make sure that it keeps it nice and sort of tight at the end there. Okay, so we have something like that. Now, nothing new in that. This is what we're going to use to actually pull through this coil here. Now I'll just go a little bit closer and see if will it stay in focus. Okay, so let's just thread this through, and of course this is far too long. I don't need anything near as long as that, so I'll cut those couple of little bits off there. So all we're doing now is we're just threading those through like that. Now, because this is 2mm wick, we won't have any issue at all, apart from the fact that it's just split there a bit, with actually pulling it through there like that. But once you've done that, put it on its side like that, and this is the slightly tricky part. Then what we need to do is take this shorter piece and sandwich it between the two other pieces like so. You can probably see that there. Once you've done that, you can then proceed to pull through. Now you have to be careful. What's happening here then is, because the two outer parts are being compressed, the inner part is being sandwiched in between the two of them, and hence the name of this particular method, the steam sandwich, thought up by Pidgeot on the Irish Vaping Facebook page. So all we do is then just gently pull that through. Now obviously we don't want to knock this coil off or whatever, so once it's gotten through to a certain point, the actual silica on either side is actually going to hold it in place, right? So we don't need to push this in anymore. So at that point, what you really need to do is just get your nail in at the leading edge of the coil to hold it in place, and then as you pull it through, let's see if we can show you this in a slightly better way. If I can show it to you from this side here. As we pull it through, you can see, and it's tight, that what's happening is it's actually pulling all three pieces through. So that's what you end up with. As you can see that, we have our two outer ones and we have our inner one. But what that has now done is that means that we have enough silica in there so that it's going to make a good connection with the coil. It's not going to be all loose and floppy if you only had two coils going through there, or rather two loops of two strands of silica. So that's how you actually get three going through that particular coil. So all good there. So what we'll do now is I'll show you how I actually turn this into, what I do with the silica that's actually in there, and see if we can make this into a setup that really works. Okay, now the first thing that we want to do is, obviously we don't need this bit of wire at the end, and certainly we don't need as much wick as we have there at the moment. But just center everything to make sure that you've got enough wick on both sides. You don't want to end up too short. You're going to need the same amount on each side. So once you've done that, this loop that we have at the end here, we can just cut that like that, take our little wire lead off it. Now what I find best is to actually almost stack these. So if we hold them and then we turn them like that, so that means we've got, if you can see there, one on top of another on top of another. Okay, so we have the three wicks all stacked one on top of each other. And for me, that's the method that works best. So what do we do with those? Well, with the first one, what we're going to do, and again, there's no particular order in actually doing this. The first one that we have, we can actually get rid of most of it, okay? This is just going to be, it's almost, you know, just a small little bit of a wick at the top, okay? We don't need the ends of it. So what we'll do is we'll just go in with this clippers here. And again, just make sure that it stays on the top. It's not absolutely super critical, but if you can do it, then you're better off doing it. So let's just cut that off there. So that's that one there. Now let's do the same thing on the other side. Now again, making sure that the one that you're cutting at this side is the other part of this one. You know, you don't want to be sort of, in each case, what you're doing on each side, you're doing with that single strand, with that particular strand. So again, if we want to just chop this one off here as well, somewhere around that. So as you can see, that's now left that little bit in the middle. Okay. Now, checking that we have the right ones, the next thing that we want to do is with our lower one, and again, you can tell by just sliding, you know, which one is which. Now, I had that wrong there. So there's one. Oops, I'll show it to you there. There's one which is a single one there, okay? So with that particular one, what we want to do is again, chop it short, but slightly longer than the other one. If we look at the side here, and let me see if I can find something to just point it to you. As you know, with a Kayfun, what we need to do is make sure that this channel here, the little channel up the side, remains clear. So what I want to do with this bottom one here is I want to actually cut that off just above this little deck here. Okay, so that means that for me to do that, it's going to mean that it's going to be about, say, about a ½ centimeter long, something like that. Okay, so again, just checking that it's the right one. Yes, that's the right one. What we can do is then just go in and chop that about there. Okay. And then we do the same thing on the other side. Go in, chop it about there. Now this is going to be sort of difficult to see, but let's see if I can show it to you. On the very top here, we've got that shortest piece, which was the first one we cut. Underneath that, we have our next piece, which was a slightly longer one. And then finally here we have our longest one, which is our bottom one. Now what we need to do with this bottom one is just like we have with the previous nest coils, is we want to basically loop that underneath and send it back up again like that. So let's see if I can show you this. So looking at it here, here is our longer of our two short ones. And what we need to do is basically loop this underneath there and then send it upwards like that. So essentially it's going to be like that, with that bottom part touching the deck. And on this other side, we're going to be doing exactly the same thing. We're basically going to be looping it underneath and then bringing it upwards like that. So let's see if we can do that. Hold it on this side. Hold it on this side. So here's our two pieces heading skywards here. So now, once we've got that in place, we can actually put on the top. So just slide it on like that. Now, when you look inside, you can see that our coil is in position there. We have our shorter little piece at the top. we've got our slightly longer piece below that, and then we've got these, the start of both of these ones here underneath that again, which is touching down on the deck. Okay, so that's what it looks like. So now all we need to do is basically do what we've always done with any of the other nests, and that's essentially just bring these pieces down, pop this down in place, so pop this in here and then shove that down. Now again, probably using the term shove is not a good idea, because as ever with the Kayfun, what you need to do is be a little bit careful about how you actually push any wick down. So you can see the first one has actually gone down there now. It's basically gone to the bottom of where the threads are. You don't want to go any deeper than that. Okay, and then on the second one here, again we do exactly the same thing. Just pop it down. So that it's in our nest shape. Okay, so that's what we're left with. And as ever with these nests, you want to see some air down there. You know, you don't want it to be just absolutely stuffed full of silica. And as you can see there on both sides of the coil, it looks nice and clean, nice and airy. You can see the screws through it. But essentially what we've got in there is 3 strands of silica, all of them feeding each other. Now if I just take the lock off this, let's see what happens when we hit the button. Now I think I could probably do with a new battery in this. It's starting to heat up, but it's taking its time. Okay, you can see it there. So that's all working exactly as it should do. So what I'll do now is I'll pop a little bit of liquid into it and we can see how it actually performs. I'll also put a new battery into it at the same time. Okay, so today going into it we have some long bottom leaf, 12 milligram. So I'll just pop a little bit of this into it. And smells absolutely gorgeous. So there we go, there's just a little bit in there just to sort of set it up and get it going. So let's have a look and see how this thing performs. Again, this is about 1.6, 1.7, something like that. But yeah, plenty of vapor coming off that, so that seems to be working very nicely. So let's put it all together. So all put back together again. It's on my Provari here. It is reading 1.6. I just checked it there. Just have another check. 1.6. Yeah, 1.6. So that's exactly as it was before when it had the cotton in it. As ever, when you actually start off with one of, you've just filled up a Kayfun, or Kayfun Light in this case, what you need to do is just give it a couple of primer pulls. Now when you do so, make sure you don't pull too hard, because actually, if you get a big jet of liquid going into it, it can actually, it can move the wick somewhat, and it can just sort of mess things up a little bit. Plus as well, it can flood it. So you're better off just a couple of gentle ones. Now this is, as I said, 1.6, so let's see, what should we run it at? If it's a 1.6, okay, I'm running it at 4 here, and we'll see what happens with this. And that works perfectly. What I found with this particular method is that first of all you get no dry hits, but then again with most of the other sort of nest type coils you don't get dry hits anyway. Now there is more, I think, in fact with this stuff, I'm not sure even if this is 100% VG, it might be. But what I was using in it before. In fact, if I can see here, this is one that I did yesterday, and this has got cigarillos in it. So again, Kayfun, exactly the same method as that one, totally identical. And as you can see, that is a 50-50. And it produces. If anything, this thing produces more vapor than others. Now, for me, that's not necessarily a plus. You know, when I go out, I like to be reasonably discreet. I don't like to be just disappear in a fog in the corner of the room or whatever. But certainly for any of you who really like lots of vapor, this particular method seems to produce an awful lot of vapor. The other thing is that, you know, running at 1.6, you know, on a mechanical mod, and let's just try that now. Stick it on to, I'll do the one I did today. I'm going to stick it onto the Nemesis here. And this has got a fresh battery in it, but obviously this isn't going to be running it as high as this one is in terms of the power going into it. So let's just see what happens. That's the VG based one. Might as well go through all the different variations here just to show you how it's working. So I'll take that off and I'll put on the 50-50, which is again the El Toro Cigarillos. Stick that one onto it there, on a mechanical. And nothing, and that's because it's not making proper contact. So let me just change this, tighten that up at the bottom there, pop it in again, undo the screw there, tighten that up, and here we go. Again, plumes. So, as a method, I think it's great. I think it works really, really well. It's just by putting the silica wick in, and I'm a silica wick fan, putting it in that way, where you're actually sort of getting enough wick in there so that it's nice and tight around the edges of the coil. And then by doing that sort of nest version there to ensure that it doesn't dry out, it means that it just seems to produce and produce and produce. Loads of vapor, loads of flavour, and I'm absolutely delighted with it. So, as I said before, this was named by Pidgeot on Irish Vaping on a Facebook page, the Steam Sandwich. So that's what we're going to call it, the Steam Sandwich. And as you can see from the amount of vapor coming off it, that certainly seems to be what it is. So hope you found that of use to you. It's worth a try. A little bit fiddly when you do it the first time, but subsequent to that, you know, it's really quite easy to do. If you can do it on camera, like I was doing there, then when you don't have a camera, you're not trying to sort of, you know, keep it in position. You know, you can put it together very, very quickly. Now, it may also be worth experimenting, seeing as you've got 3 tails coming out of it on either side. There may be other ways that you might like to sort of run the tails, which may suit you better. But either way, the key thing on this is 6 mils of wick, so 3 by 2 mils strands of wick in a 3 mil coil, microcoil or compressed coil, just seems to work very, very well. So hope you enjoyed it, and catch you again soon. Cheers.